Back, Stiles and Watkins. Just Stiles for the rest of the week. Chris Watkins enjoying some much-deserved time off. And we are joined by Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee. Chris, long time, no visit. Good to be back on the show, my guy.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Are we about to get hyphy on here? Is that what the lead-in intro music is leading me to believe?
Well, it's funny because we've been having conversations. It's Simone behind the glass today, but Nate had a really terrible take. Nate didn't understand the Bay Area, and he had a take that he basically said, well, San Jose is the Bay Area, but Santa Clara, we got to stop at Santa Clara. And it was pretty rough. It was a pretty rough take.
Having lived in San Jose for a little while, I could probably say that a lot of the locals there would not appreciate that take.
I don't think. Well, Brendan Nunes, our own San Jose guy, wouldn't appreciate it. But we appreciate you, Chris. Thank you for joining. Let's start here. Let's start with the Kings, and then we'll go to the Niners. As far as the Kings are concerned, look, where we're at right now in the summer, everybody is looking for something to talk about. I mean, even the aggregators don't have anything to talk about. That's just what it is. Do you think this competitive workout with Isaiah Thomas and Lonnie Walker and Tony Bradley and JTA, do you think this competitive workout has been a little bit blown out of proportion, or do you think one of these guys might make some noise?
Yeah, I mean, JTA was on the team last year, and so there's certainly some familiarity there. I think, look, if you know, these are the types of things you can do if you're the Kings front office, is evaluate some guys who might make an impact on the fringes of your roster. But I think you made the point that there's it's the quietest time in the NBA calendar, right? And it's just that this is the only thing that's happening, so it's the only thing we have to talk about. I would not expect, even if they do sign one of these guys, I would not expect any of them to have a major role in the season, upcoming. So I would just say, yeah, if you're really into Kings minutia, dive all the way in, man. It's it's the only thing we got at this point. But I think the appropriate perspective on the season is that it's probably not gonna matter much in terms of wins and losses and how the Kings do in the playoffs and all that.
Any of the names tickle your fancy or no?
I mean, not particularly. I think Juan Toscano-Anderson would make sense from a depth perspective because, he can play up defensively. He can play, 4s and 5s. He's been in that system for a while. He's been on winning teams. He's familiar with Mike Brown and the staff, obviously. So that's a guy that I think would make sense. But, I don't know if there's really a difference maker on that list, to be honest.
Yeah, we're going to have Brendan Nunes on later, and he just put out a piece on Sactownsports.com about just some of the free agents still available, the guys that they worked out, some of the guys that they haven't worked out. Are there any names floating around that interest you? Not the guys that they worked out, but just in general. Seti Osman's a name that's come up a little bit, but anybody that you think maybe there's something there, or hey, there's a reason nobody's going after these guys?
I think there's probably a reason nobody's going after these guys. I haven't been fully, to be honest, I haven't been fully diving into the NBA free agency crop in late August.
It's pretty dry.
It's pretty dry. Yeah, I think the Kings roster is pretty much set. I think the rotation's pretty much set, barring anything unforeseen. I think the guys that they have now that everyone's familiar with, that's going to be the team that they rock with. And if they make any additions in August, like I said, I would really doubt that any of these guys are going to be difference makers.
46.5, Chris, the schedule has now come out. 46.5, the over under. Now, Chris Watkins always famously says you got to play everybody. Doesn't really matter the order. Some people maybe thought that the 46.5 doesn't look as good based on the stretch. I know they have a brutal stretch starting at the end of January leading up into the All-Star break, but how are you feeling about the 46.5 over, under, or are you just going to stay away?
Yeah, if they stay healthy, I think I do like the over. I think DeMar DeRozan is just a really nice fit, and I know there's talk about where he's at in his career, age wise, and things like that. But I mean, he's going to benefit from playing with De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk and and Domantas Sabonis and Keegan Murray to an extent. And I like what DeMar DeRozan does for the Kings because I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of Keegan Murray. I think last year there was a lot on Keegan Murray's shoulders to evolve from, a spot up shooter to a playmaker, a focal point of the offense. And that
Right.
was a big topic this time last summer, right? With how he played in summer league, sort of playing some point guard and distributing and things like that. I think now with DeMar DeRozan being another ball handler and playmaker, you can get Keegan Murray back to sort of that spot up shooter role. And I'm not saying that's what he'll be limited to, but I think that's probably the best way to maximize him, at least in this point in his career, rather than have him be a focal point. Because, Keegan Murray going up against some elite defenders, and we saw it, in the playing game in New Orleans, it's just not really, he's just not there yet. And so, to add DeMar DeRozan, to add a serious offensive force who can play make and distribute. I think his ability to distribute for others is a little bit underrated, while also being a potential closer.
Yeah.
Could make the Kings really, really lethal. So if you look at a lineup with De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis, that could be a really, really tough lineup to beat in crunch time. And I know the West is really good and really competitive, but I think if the Kings stay healthy, I think they have the horses to hit that over at 46.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee. Chris, before we get to Niners, we're getting a text. The text is from the 279. You got to be careful here, Chris, because this guy he's building a bit of a cult following. They want to know what's your take on Timmy time. They think that he should get signed now and be on the Sacramento roster. What is your take on Drew Timmy?
I don't have one. I wish I saw Brandon Nunez walking around your studio. I'd be more curious to hear his, but honestly, I don't have one.
Come on, Chris.
Sorry to hold you down.
Just say Timmy's got to be on the squad. That's all you got to say.
I mean,
say the magic
it can't
words.
hurt. It can't hurt, right? Like I've said, all the other names are not really doing a whole lot for me, so I have no reason to say, why Timmy shouldn't be on the squad. So sure, sign him up.
There you go. That's all we needed. Talking to Chris Biderman. Let's get to some Niners here. Chris, we played some sound from Matt Mayoko, and Matt Mayoko basically was saying that he more so thought that these two guys and Trent Williams, and I know we're not really worried about Trent Williams, as Sean Jackson was on FS1 talking about it, but as it pertains to both of these guys and Brandon Aiyuk, hey, they probably just didn't really want to work out that much during the summer, and everything's going to be okay. I believe that for Trent Williams. I don't necessarily believe that for Brandon Aiyuk as far as why he didn't play, but I do agree with Matt Mayoko as two of the teams that were interested in Brandon Aiyuk are two teams that still haven't named a starter. What do you make of this Brandon Aiyuk thing? I've heard you talk about it on different platforms. What do you make about this Brandon Aiyuk thing, number one? Not necessarily who's at fault, who's not at fault, but just how we got here. I mean, John Lynch doesn't even know how we got here. That's what he said. And number two, can you help make sense of the Niners, their plan at wide receiver, signing Robbie Chosen-Anderson and Trent Taylor? I mean, for a team that just always seems so buttoned up and organized, it feels like this one they just missed. They just missed.
Yeah, potentially. So on Brandon Aiyuk, I think this is a case where you have a team that's very, very tough to negotiate with and a player that's also been tough to negotiate with, right? Like my sense is that Brandon Aiyuk has a lot of asks and has not necessarily been consistent in terms of the things he's asked for, right? There was an offer in the spring for $26 million a year, and that's low, right? We saw a bunch of receivers come in for far more than that, and then Brandon Aiyuk reevaluated. But look, Brandon Aiyuk requested a trade. The 49ers more or less facilitated his trade request with multiple teams, and then, Brandon Aiyuk did not sign off on the trade. So if you're the Niners, you're like, all right, well, we're not negotiating a contract. We've negotiated these deals. You don't want the deals. Now we're still negotiating the contract. It's both sides. Like, I think both sides deserve an equal amount of blame because of how stubborn both sides seem to be.
Yeah.
But I still would anticipate a deal getting done. You've heard from multiple credible people say, the first 3 years of the contract have mostly been agreed to. There are just details on the fourth season that need to get hammered out. So I would expect a deal to get done. When I think sometime or within the next few days, so Brandon Aiyuk can at least get a couple weeks of practice in before the season starts. I think that would be really important. Look, like the thing for the 49ers, the thing I keep coming back to, when they went to the Super Bowl the last two times under Kyle Shanahan, they were the number one seed.
Mhm.
Right. And they, last year in particular, they came out hot. They went to Pittsburgh week 1 and blew the doors off the Steelers and instantly announced themselves as one of the best teams in the league. When you don't have Brandon Aiyuk at practice and when you don't have Trent Williams at practice, I wonder if you're going to be able to win all these games you're supposed to win early on in the season, because a slow start like they had in 2021 or 2022 could potentially cost you the number one seed, which makes it incrementally more difficult to get back to the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have the first round bye, and you're one of the older teams in the NFL. You really need that first round bye. So when I look at, what's happening with Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams, if I'm the 49ers, my goal is to get these guys in as soon as possible to avoid having that slow start, because I
Mhm.
do think there's value in, just getting reps in training camp and not, I know people say, well, you just want to be playing your best football in November, December, and January.
Yeah.
While that's definitely true, the Niners, especially with this group and all of the injury history that a lot of these core players have had,
Mhm.
you want that first round bye. You almost need that first round bye at this point. And so that's always the goal, is to get the number one seed. And that's borne out because the only times they've been to the Super Bowl, they've been the number one seed. So those are the things I worry about with the Niners and these contract negotiations. But I would expect them to get done. But
Mhm.
I would just wonder if it's going to lead to a slower start to the season than they would hope for.
Well, and I think that kind of leads me to my last question, Chris, because they're an older team. We know the numbers as it pertains to teams that lose the Super Bowl and how tough it is to get back. This drama that has gone on with Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk, on top of the fact that you had a heartbreaking loss in the Super Bowl, do you think that the Niners have another run left, or is it going to catch up to them? And that's not to say the window is closed, but this season, hey, we just got to get through this season. We saw what happened with Debo when he had a contract dispute. He came in out of shape. He was not the same Debo. Same thing happened to a lesser degree with Nick Bosa. So Brandon Aiyuk, we know he's working out on his own, but does it feel like this might be one of those seasons where it's, let's just get everything back on track? We might have to say bye to Debo. Hopefully Ricky Pearsall works out and we just rock and roll next season. Or do you think, hey, once the pads come off, once they're facing the Jets on that Monday night, everything will be okay?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they have another run in them, but I think it's more about, like the only questions you really have about this team: can they stay healthy? Can they
Right.
keep all of their guys on the field? And at the advanced ages that some of these guys are at, when you're talking about Trent Williams or George Kittle, and even Debo Samuel, he's not, Debo Samuel isn't old, but
Right.
he plays he plays a very physical brand, and he's missed a bunch of time with injuries. I just think if they can keep all their guys on the field, then yeah, they absolutely have a run in them. What I'm curious to see this season and beyond is just, can Brock Purdy elevate the roster around him? Because at some point it's going to be less, Brock Purdy making $800,000 a year on a star laden team. At some point, starting next offseason, Brock Purdy is going to get paid. And is it going to be a situation where Brock Purdy is elevating the guys around him? Does he
Mhm.
evolve into that type of star quarterback? And I think there's a chance that he could. And we saw it with Tom Brady. Tom Brady, early on in his career, he was a quote unquote game manager, and the Patriots defense was really the straw that stirred the drink for New England there. And then Brady turned into a megastar quarterback and started
Mhm.
winning a bunch of games on his own. I'm not comparing Brock Purdy to Tom Brady, but I think there's a similarity in the sense that, like, all right, this is how your career started as a quote unquote game manager, being carried by your surroundings. Can you evolve and become a star player that elevates everyone around you? And that's what the 49ers are going to need if they're going to have long-term sustained success,
Yeah.
if they're paying Brock Purdy $60 million a year. So that's the thing I'm going to be looking for. Does Brock Purdy continue his high level of play, but does he elevate himself to a guy that lifts everyone around him rather than being a passenger on the ship?
Chris Biderman, Sacramento Bee. Be sure to check out all of his work at the Sacramento Bee. Chris, thank you as always. Look, you said you couldn't do it tomorrow. You couldn't hop on the show tomorrow because of a potluck. Chris, what are you taking to the potluck?
Oh man, that's a great question.
You don't know
Charcuterie.
yet?
No, I
No,
don't.
Chris. Charcuterie.
Charcuterie. You got
Chris, it better be some good. That I like my cheddar cheese. It better be sharp, Chris. It better be sharp. You taking
it'll
some
be good.
dang charcuterie. Come on,
It'll be
Chris.
good. I'm a high level charcuterie guy. I'm not just gonna phone it in. I'll be
Okay.
going to Whole Foods, hitting the
Okay.
cheese aisle, doing it right.
There you
Not just
go.
going to another store, slapping together an already made charcuterie board.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and I'm sure your coworkers will appreciate your high level charcuterie board. Chris Biderman, Sacramento Bee. Thank you so much, Chris. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, man. See ya.
Coming up next, we have some fun.